right, let us get back to the conversation about Todd Blanche, former U.S. attorney and MS Now legal analyst. Joyce Vance still with us. New York Times Justice correspondent Glenn Thrush still with us, along with former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, Mark McKinnon. So, Glenn, I interrupted you mid-sentence, and I apologize for that. Let's get back to the question, which was, walk me through his appearance today on Capitol Hill.
It was extraordinary. And, as I pointed out, Chris Van Hollen, the ranking Democrat on the committee, pointed out that Blanche is is Trump's former defense lawyer and accused him essentially of acting in that capacity. And Blanche, apart from his outrage, didn't have much of a response to that. And then I should just say, in the subsequent couple of hours since Blanche left, the Justice Department slipped onto its website this extraordinary document. In which they are essentially inoculating, it's very hard to understand, but it appears that by the terms of the agreement, the settlement of this case, that the Justice Department is using this as an opportunity to essentially inoculate Donald Trump, his family, and all of his family-owned businesses from again, it's vague, but it appears from past, present, or future tax prosecutions. It's just it's breathtaking what they're doing right now.
That struck me, and here's why it struck me, because you on the one hand have, and Joyce, I want you to tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong, because you're the lawyer here. But on the one hand, you have Vance saying on the White House podium that Donald Trump is not going to get any money from this $1.776 billion fund. Not going to get any money. But when you slip in, as Glenn pointed out, this note that indemnifies, I guess, the Trump organization and Trump himself from issues about tax in the past, does that mean that what they're saying is your taxes, as Trump has said, have been under audit or alleged to be under audit for years now? Are they now not going to potentially go after unpaid back taxes? Or any discrepancies in taxes they might have uncovered? So he's not getting the money from the fund, but he might be saving some money in this other way?
So look, Donald Trump just got the one thing that most legal experts agree that even with his expansive view of the power he has as president, that he can't do for himself, and that's give himself a pardon. This would seem to say that he's off scot-free. There's never been any indication, Katie, that his tax audit was a criminal sort of a setting. And I've seen nothing that indicates that. So I think it's remarkably interesting that they pursued this get out of jail free card as part of the settlement of this civil action. It is astounding. I thought that when we saw the creation of the $1.776 billion judgment fund to benefit Trump's friends and family from January 6th, that we couldn't see any worse form of corruption. But this is really continuing to put some meat on those bones.
What about the optics of this, Mark? $1.8 billion, I'm going to just round up, for anybody that says they've been politically persecuted by the administration and then gets approved by this 5-person panel, which who knows who they're going to be, at the same time that prices across the country are rising, costs are rising, and Americans are saying that Donald Trump doesn't care about them.
Well, doesn't care about them. It doesn't really seem to care about the politics of it all, which, ultimately won't affect him if he's not running for a third term, which we're not even clear about that. But the whole thing, Katie, just strikes me as so incredibly diabolical. This is like they took an AI bot and just said, go see what you can do to destroy the Constitution and anything else that will help Donald Trump, financially or otherwise, and his friends and his donors and the J6 rioters. It's so astonishing that I think it leaves so many of us slack-jawed that you could even imagine something like this. Now, my hope is that somehow there's something left in our Constitution that will ultimately prohibit this in some fashion. But I'm also thinking that the one thing we've got to seriously consider with the new Congress or new president, we've got to rewrite the Constitution. I mean, because it's as if Donald Trump came into office and just said, I'm going to see what I can do to destroy every element of the Constitution possible. And he's doing a pretty good job.
Well, what we've learned, Glenn, we've talked about this a lot, is that there are a lot of norms that presidents operated under and the agencies operated under that were just norms. They were practices that were in place because people were not, you're really not supposed to do these things. It doesn't look good. Politically, it would hurt you in the past. It's not moral. It's not right. They're norms. I think Mark has a great point there.
Well, look, I remember talking to some of the Garland people at the end of 2024 about what they were concerned about. What would be the indications that the Trump Justice Department were going to be shredding the rule book? And essentially they said there's something called the Justice, which prescribes prosecutorial behavior. And they're like, look and just see if it vanishes from their website. Well, interestingly, it hasn't. But it doesn't matter because they've completely ignored it. I think, Mark talks about constitutional reform. I think what we're also dealing with here in between norms and the Constitution are statutes. And the problem here is we have a Congress, Republicans in Congress, who have not exercised their Article I authority over the president. I think what was very interesting is now that their political future is somewhat detached from Trump's, and Trump does not apparently give a damn about their own fate, apart from being perceived as a kingmaker, right? I think what you're starting to see is an understanding and an attempt to push back a little bit. It was noteworthy that John Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, said he was not a quote unquote not a fan of this fund.
Yeah, but still, it's so.
Right.
It's so limp, it's not.
No, it is, but it is.
It's the beginnings
for him,
of it.
That's like shouting that's like using a bullhorn. And when Thune is usually the last one to come forward with this stuff. So what that indicates to me as a recovering and scarred Hill reporter is that a lot of these senators who were getting chased down the hallway by reporters being asked this question went to Thune and said, please, sir, address this so you can take some of the heat off of us. You saw John Kennedy from Louisiana raise questions about this. Rand Paul has come out against it. Not surprisingly, I think Cassidy, who just got defeated in Louisiana, is a no on this. You're going to see Murkowski, Collins, et cetera. The one thing is, I'm not anticipating Republicans rebel against this, but there's a lot that can happen legislatively. Riders put on appropriations bills. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that this thing is going to go forward without a glitch.
Yeah. And Joyce, one more question about norms. One of the what hinges on the immunity decision that the Supreme Court made a couple years ago regarding Donald Trump is that a president interacting with his AG, which is now immune, that a president will interact properly, that the president is the kind of person who will interact properly and hold himself to standards that the founders envisioned, and not just try to do whatever he wants and use the Justice Department as his own personal law firm and direct them publicly, which we saw with Pam Bondi, to go after people that he thinks wronged him.
This president has blown past that norm so many times that, frankly, I've just lost track. I don't think it's unfair to characterize the top leadership at the Justice Department as Donald Trump's personal law firm. And I understand that the acting attorney general took umbrage at that characterization today. But the reality is that Todd Blanche is auditioning for the permanent gig. He is the acting attorney general. And no one who's serving in that role should have as their North Star an effort to please the president, an effort to win the permanent job for themselves. And yet that is absolutely the world that we're living in. The norms don't even exist anymore. I mean, I hear Mark saying that we need to rewrite the Constitution. It seems to me that the first thing that Congress needs to do when it gets its act back together is take some of the norms and turn them into laws.